Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're listening to this panel session on capacity building for a net zero Africa. It's a remarkably challenging time as we move up towards COP26 in Glasgow. As everyone knows, states around the world, including African states, have made ambitious proposals in respect of their nationally determined contributions agreed under the Paris Agreement. Execution of those, of course, is going to be absolutely critical. In addition to that, the 2018 report, the special report of the IPCC on global warming of 1.5 degrees, and more recently, the sixth assessment report, the contribution of Working Group 1, have made it clear that we have to, in fact, increase our ambition in terms of meeting the requirements to be able to keep the rise in global warming at 1.5 degrees or less. This will be very challenging. And the purpose of our discussion today is to determine where African states are at this time in terms of their plans and in terms of their ability to deliver on those plans. And to the extent that any further capacity building may be required, what we can do about ensuring that that's put in place as quickly as possible. We have an excellent panel of specialists who are with us today to address those questions. Firstly, Dr. Elham Ibrahim, well known, I'm sure, to most of you. She was, among many other things, a Commissioner of Infrastructure and Energy at the African Union Commission. She's, of course, a vice chair of the World Energy Council for Africa, and she's been appointed as the chairperson of the MENA Regional Committee on the Global Energy Interconnection, Development and Cooperation Organization. Then we have Ms. Victoria Shiimi, who is the chief economist for energy planning and research at the Ministry of Mines and Energy in Namibia. And we have, in addition, we have David Muthike, who is the Strategy and Innovation Director for the Kenya Electricity Generating Company and also the Vice Chair of the Energy Society of Kenya. This will allow us to take a perspective from north, from southwest, and from east, and hopefully give us some insight into where we are in terms of our performance today. So let me go to Dr. Elham first, if I may. Could you tell us from the perspective of Egypt, where you are, what your targets are, and how well you're on track to actually achieving those? Dr. Elham.
Thank you very much. And it's really a pleasure to be with you again and with my colleagues in this wonderful session. Egypt, with only 0.6% contribution to the global emissions, is really badly subjected to the climate change. And Egypt was one of the countries that submitted the NDCs in 2015. And in 2017, it submitted the NDCs to be activated in 2020. I can say that Egypt has achieved many steps and many actions in the way to achieve and realize the commitments in its NDC. These actions include different steps. I can mention in the energy sector, we have reshaped the energy mix from 92% of oil and gas and 8% of renewable and hydro to be 60% of natural gas with combined cycle, 35%, and maybe now it is more, it's 42% from renewable energy and hydro, and also to put the nuclear component. In the transport sector, we are switching from oil to gas in the transport, and we are promoting electric vehicles. Even we are planning to have joint manufacturing of electric vehicles with China. Also, we are moving in the non-road transports like metro, like electric train, like bicycles. Now our president is encouraging too much people to use it. Then in the industry, we have the energy efficiency. We are trying or planning or even implementing projects for waste heat recovery and using efficient lighting. That is beside the new generation of new cities. We have now the smart cities, the 4G generation of cities using the renewable energy and the new technologies, beside the passive architecture in our buildings, especially in the desert region. I think we can say that we are targeting to reduce our CO2 emissions of the level of 2018 by 20% by 2030. I think this is the case now, and if you need some more details, I can say. Thank you.
That's very kind. Thank you so much. I think that gives us an excellent frame, and it's an excellent way of approaching the question. We'll come back in the discussions later to asking what may be needed in order to move things further, but that I think is an excellent introduction. Victoria, can I come to you right across on the west coast and the south of the continent in Namibia to ask about your nationally determined contributions and how well Namibia is on track at the moment to realizing those. Victoria, to you.
Thank you very much, Sin. Thank you, other speakers. What is currently happening in Namibia, we are actually right on track, especially since we are so blessed with abundant solar and wind resources, especially on the southern part of the country, that's towards South Africa. What has been happening is that we have been through our energy regulatory authority, which is now currently only for electricity, has introduced a new mechanism that enables the independent power producers to be licensed and then generate power that is fed onto the grid, and also diversify the electricity market in terms of competition or monopoly when it comes to distribution as well as generation. This mechanism allows independent power producers, or it allows contestable customers to procure electricity from any available sources out there. At the same time, we also have a lot of projects going on in terms of the solar energy generation across the country. And of late, our government is embarking upon a feasibility study to produce hydrogen that is also on the southern part of the country. Liderates on your way to South Africa as well. We contemplating to at least produce 0.5 metric ton of hydrogen with an output product of ammonia. and that would require a country to use 1 gigawatts of electricity. And that electricity will definitely be generated from the wind and solar sources in that specific area as well. So this is quite a new development for the country, and there's quite a lot of stakeholders involved and external international investors geared towards taking a stake in this project as well. It might not be for local consumption for now, but definitely that will boost also our country's export. And in terms of capacity, there's a lot that has been happening in the country, not only towards cleaner fuel and also towards sustainability in general, also towards reducing now the CO2 emission. We as government has established an institute called Namibia Energy Institute that is geared towards more research work for energy related concepts and initiatives. The same institute also provides capacity buildings, especially to graduates from the vocational education sector in terms of how to handle and how to install renewable energy technologies. And this specifically, we are talking about our solar water heaters, and we are also talking about our home systems, and also off-grid electricity, especially for areas that are really such a large distance from the grid, and they would not for now or in few years to come be accommodated with the grid, looking at the cost implications as well. So really there is much going on. Our academic institutions has also introduced several few courses with regard to offering renewable energies. We have the University of Namibia that introduced a master in renewable energy. We also have a private university, which is the International University of Management, that has recently also established a department that is dealing with climate and environmental related courses. And all these are actually geared towards the country's strategies and initiative of reducing CO2 emission. With regard to the sector in general, we have the petroleum sector. We definitely do not have crude, we do not produce, we rely on 100% importation, but we have an initiative where we are migrating from the old types of fuel that were so much sulfur contentalized towards the cleaner fuel, which is 0.05 sulfur content and all that. And this is actually an initiative for the SADC region, where a committee, an oil and gas committee, has also been set up at the regional level, where all countries are being urged to migrate from the old types of fuel into the cleaner fuels. And there has also been talk with an engagement with the support of the UN and the UNDP with regard to the introduction and testing of electric vehicles also in the country. And this has been going on very well. I would say we are right on track. We are now currently at a planning and research division involved in so many policy review, policy development to try and now accommodate the concept and reduce or find a way towards reducing the carbon emission. We are busy about to complete a policy on energy storage regulations, because we have realized that although we are spearheading the initiative of producing or generating more electricity from solar power and wind, we actually found ourselves at a stack where we do not have anywhere we can store that energy for either tomorrow or any other day's usage. So now we were now busy developing such a regulation, such a rules, so that we can try now and store that energy for any other day usage apart either from export or and such. So basically everything is on track. We're trying our level best. When it comes to finances, we also trying engaging different agencies, in financial institutions, AFDB, World Bank. We are working more with World Bank nowadays. We have also conducted a study, which is geospatial study, to assess the areas, especially in rural areas that need electrification, so that we also find the least cost-effective ways of providing electricity and ensuring that, yes, we have also reached the access to energy electricity as it has been. So yeah, that's what I can give for now.
Well done. Thank you, Victoria. It's a huge relief to know that capitalizing on the ability to be able to deploy solar and wind at scale even takes you to the holy grail potentially of green hydrogen and ammonia. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Let me turn from there then to David Muthike, halfway up the East Coast, and get a sense of how things are going in Kenya and East Africa more generally. David.
Thank you, Sin. And I'm speaking from Nairobi, Kenya. And I might start by saying that in Kenya, we are blessed because the United Nations Environmental Program Office in Nairobi, and perhaps that gives us the impetus to be in the forefront of climate change initiatives. And as a country, we are actually have a number of progressive initiatives to make sure we are contributing to CO2 emission reductions. Looking at Kenya, actually, we are witnessing a bit of climate change because we normally have winter in July. And for the last 3 months, actually, the temperatures have been very low, which is very unusual. And this is one of the issues we are actually attributing to the issue of climate change. And see, let me say from where I see from personal point of view, the issue of global warming, I think we are underestimating it. It's a complex issue and it requires a drastic decision in terms of reducing the carbon emissions. It's not going to be linear, it's a complex issue and we really have to think of having a shift. And nobody is safe, whether it's Africa, whether it's Europe, where is Latin America, wherever it is, nobody is safe because World is one. And therefore what we do, each and every one of us, is very, very important to make sure we are really reducing carbon emissions to the atmosphere. So let me talk a little bit about Kenya. And I'll talk a number of things. One of the initiatives we have as a country is the issue of energy mix, noting that most of the carbon emissions we have seen in other countries is actually comes from power generation, which is usually from coal and other fossil-based fuels. And in Kenya, we have a very strong green energy mix, driven primarily by geothermal and hydro. Our national capacity is not that large, it's about 3,000 megawatts. And you find out of that, close to 70% of that installed capacity is green. And the fossil fuel based on are basically for peaking, they are basically for peaking capacity. So you find our baseload capacity is basically green. And we have seen a situation where our output or rather our consumption is around 85% green. And that's something we, as a country, we are focusing on, and KenGen being a government institution or other government organization is one of the things we are making sure we bring the green agenda and green power plants online. We also concentrating on more solar and wind as intermittent sources to make sure the energy mix continues to be green and cutting down on the carbon emissions. That's one area that we are very keen going forward. Number two is the issue of rural population, because rural population, they use firewood, which is actually also has an effect on emitting carbon. Some of them also use kerosene for lighting. And one of the things government has done is to intensify electrification so that the lighting can actually replace the kerosene use. And that lighting will come from green energy. So there's quite a bit of push towards the 100% electrification. Currently, it's around 70%. And looking at it, also the government is also keen on efficient cook stoves to make sure the communities that are not able to get a clean cooking fuel, they're actually using efficient cook stoves to limit the carbon emissions. On the industrial point of view, we have what we call a Center for Energy Efficiency, where the government is working with the private sector to improve efficiency in their industrial processes to make sure they're also reducing on carbon emissions. With the United Nations and other private players, the e-mobility has become a major focus now. We have some of the taxi vehicles in Nairobi, who actually now erect EV vehicles. And as KenGen also, we are also in the limelight to test our charging station to also play a part in the mobility, which we believe will be a major shift in terms of carbon emissions. Other than that, we also have put some structures. There are structures which are being put in place, particularly on carbon emission reduction trending platform. But those are initiatives that we want to see going forward so that we can actually have a platform where we can trend carbon emission reduction certificates and promote and encourage other contributors to be able to cut down on the emissions. Beyond there, we as KenGen, we are very keen also on this concept of green hydrogen. And we have some initial steps to find a way to can have some pilots to see if we can use based on the geothermal to see a situation whereby we can have a green hydrogen. That will also be very useful for us as a country in ammonia, which is good for fertilizer production. So I want to stop there, Sin, and conclude by saying that in rural communities, biogas has become a big boost, promoted by the government and other development partners to make sure we are not using kerosene and the firewood in terms of energy use. So I want to stop there. Those are some of the initiatives happening from the east coast of Africa. Thank you, Sin.
Thank you very much, David. That's once again an absolutely excellent contribution. I think what's most encouraging in respect of this is that, at least in respect of the plans to deliver on the NDCs, each of the three countries that we've surveyed are in fact performing according to plan. And that's extremely encouraging. The other thing that I think is very encouraging is the fact that you're all investing in developing additional technical capability, utilizing research institutions and universities in order to continue to increase the capabilities within the national society itself. As you've very correctly said, David, climate inherently, the Earth system more generally, is by definition a complex dynamical system. It has feedback loops throughout the entirety of the system. It has metastable states that shift from point to point through inflection points in unpredictable ways in a completely non-Gaussian distribution of output. So as a consequence of that, linearity is the furthest thing from the reality of what we experience. And Working Group 1's report in the sixth assessment report would suggest that there has been a significant degree of underestimation of the point that we've reached in this particular progression. So none of us can afford to rest on our laurels in this overall context. I'm going to throw out a couple of questions, and then, if I may, I'll come back to each of you to answer the ones that you feel most comfortable answering. There's no need to answer all of them, all of us, as it were. But let's just note that carbon emissions, broadly speaking, come from a wide spectrum of activities. There's obviously energy, and to the extent that we can electrify, that reduces that to an appreciable degree, as long as we're not using fossil fuels for the purpose of generating the electricity in the first instance. A number of you have referred to EVs, vehicles, in the context of mobility, which is obviously another major area. Industry, and particularly things like steel and cement and aluminium and so on, is a huge source. Residence, urban dwelling in general terms, is a significant source of emissions. And then, of course, that's the built environments, if you will. And then, of course, in addition to that, we have agriculture itself. It always seems to me that one of the challenges that one faces in countries where, as Dr. Elham pointed out right at the beginning, the contribution of any African country, even the largest, to overall emissions on a global scale is tiny. And yet, as a consequence of geographic location, and in some cases water scarcity and scarcity of agricultural land, the impacts can be quite enormous. So therefore, thinking about how we can address those challenges across all of these landscapes is deeply important. Al Gore, many, many years ago, famously said that we have to mitigate, and we have to adapt, and we will suffer. And the real issue is what the mix between mitigation, adaptation, and suffering is going to be. And that, I think, is quite a helpful way to think about the challenges that we face. So, Dr. Elham, let me come back to you. Pick that up from the perspective of Egypt, and if you wish to range wider, given your experience on the Commission of the African Union, please feel free to do so. But I'm interested as to how you think Africa should engage with these challenges in COP26 and thereafter, and what we can do to get our own houses in order, but also engage effectively with others to enable global success. Dr. Elham.
Thank you. Let me say that the target of net zero should not be isolated from other targets of development, especially in Africa. If the developed countries agree for that, it's okay. But for us as Africa region, we need to combine all of them. And we will take the energy sector as an example. We have there three elements: security, affordability and access, and the climate sustainability. If we combine these three elements for all our economies, I think we will succeed. This may not depend on African capacities only. It needs the support from developed countries and the international organizations. If we succeed, for example, in mitigation, in adaptation, we need a lot of investment that needs the support and contribution from all other entities concerned with the climate. And I read some article called, or have this title, Climate Cooperation. It was from the IMF chair, was dealing with this issue and informing that there an initial or essential need for this climate cooperation. To achieve the climate goals, we should work together. It is a global issue. It is not a region or country issue. And in Africa, we have the opportunity. We have the renewable energy resources, for example. We have even gas, and we can use the new technologies or the clean technologies, but we cannot do it alone. This is for the, for example, financing. But what are the other capacities? I mean, the policies and the institutional capacities. We still need to develop and to do more. And still we need the support and cooperation with the international cooperations, for example. In the technical and technological capacities, we still need to work with others and develop, yes, to develop our resources and our capacities with what we have, but also this is the responsibility of the globe or the world to work with us. Especially we have the potential and we have the opportunities. And I can mention here one of the good initiatives that we have in 2015. It was in Paris, just after signing the Paris Agreement. It is the Africa Renewable Energy Initiative that was targeting to have 10 gigawatts by 2020. And I can say that already it is achieved. And to have 300 gigawatts by 2030. And I hope that we can achieve that within this initiative.
Thank you. We have a fourth representative from the continent of Africa with us this morning, and that is Professor Abubakar Sani Sambo, who is, of course, a former Director General of the Energy Commission of Nigeria, a chairman of the Nigerian Member Committee of the World Energy Council, and a former Vice Chancellor, Abubakar Tafawa Balewa University in Nigeria. Abubakar, if I may, I'm going to put the same question to you that I put to the others. If you can respond crisply to it, the challenge is to identify how far Nigeria is on track at the moment to achieving its nationally determined contributions to which it committed under the Paris Agreement.
Thank you very much, Shin. I think Nigeria is really far from achieving the nationally determined contributions along with the renewable energy plan of the country, all to fit the 2050 net zero agenda. I say this in particular, not based on the beautiful policies that we've prepared for the Nigerian government and which it has said publicly it has accepted, but I'm using the World Economic Forum's Energy Transition Index. I'm sure you are aware that the forum has conducted an analysis for about 115 countries. And unfortunately, my country is way down on that list. I think second or third to the last, with an index of just about 40%, while the best country, Sweden, has about 74%. So we've got quite a long way to go. But all the same, those of us involved in the energy sector, we are campaigning very seriously. I did a paper 2 weeks ago, very strongly urging the Nigerian government to move to meet what it has agreed along with other African countries as Agenda 2063 that was taken in 2013. And it is along that line that the first NDC document of Nigeria was produced in 2015. And the second one was submitted just last month, actually July. And I'm happy for that, because in terms of planning and policy and intention, it seems the government is bent, is accepting to meet the requirements that all African countries agreed after the meeting, like I said, of 2013. But I must tell you also that many of our colleagues in the Nigerian energy sector are saying that while Africa has about 20% of the world population, its carbon emission is only about 3%. Why are we talking to them in that? We said, look, the world is a global village. The environment is global. And since we are way down in terms of electricity level, we should build new infrastructure more on the renewable pathways. And of course, they keep saying we have tremendous oil and gas resources. Well, yes, oil and gas can be used in other sectors, in pharmaceuticals, petrochemicals, fertilizer, colta, and so many, almost 200 uses. And we are beginning to move in that direction.
Thank you very much, Abubakar. That's a most helpful contribution. I'm sorry that things are not proceeding at a pace that any of us can feel comfortable with, but nonetheless, I'm quite sure that with your continued pressing and nudging within the system, together with those of colleagues, I'm sure that you will be able to move things forward. Victoria, let me come back to you now, if I may. From the perspective of Namibia, but to the extent that you'd like to speak more generally, please feel free to do so. What's your view of how Africa should take a collective position around these challenges? The NDCs are national by definition, but there are fora within the African space. You referred to SADC initiatives on a comprehensive basis. As Dr. Elham well knows, there are initiatives at the level of the African Union as well, but all of the RECs have their own initiatives on a collaborative basis in this regard. Do you, particularly against the background of what you've just heard Professor Abubakar say, do you have any thoughts or recommendations as to how Africa should tackle this problem more widely?
Thank you, Son. Fortunately, I heard what Abubakar has indicated, and it's not only a problem that is in Nigeria. It has been a problem even for us in Namibia, where you have such well-decorated regulatory framework policies and initiatives. However, when it comes to implementation, it really became such a challenge that we put the papers down there and we actually do not do what we have indicated in those papers. It is a paradigm shift for Namibia, especially having realized that we really have the potential. We are well and best positioned when it comes to renewable energy sources, especially solar and wind, and really having to go out there and look for investment, put our proposals and plans, what we intend to do, and probably how we intend to do to achieve what we want to achieve. That is what has made us be at this level today. I am very proud of what Africa in general is doing, collaborating with one another, and also establishing different platforms and forums where all countries collectively come together and put ideas on the table, help and assist one another of how as a continent we can move forward. We cannot literally work as SADC alone. And that is why probably we also have a bilateral cooperation with other countries that are outside SADC. We have to go to the West and say, this is what is happening. This is what we have read. This is what we have heard. You are involved in. How better do you think, being a Namibian, so much arid, dry country, can we put in place to reduce this CO2 emission, to be able to come on the map of using cleaner energy like any other nation? So for me, it's really such good, and I could really see the extent of engagement between the members and the countries alike. It's really ongoing. So probably what our leaders need to do is really to give us, you know, the muscles. They should give us this power, authority for us to make, also be part of this decision making, rather than just giving them what we are thinking of doing, and eventually it take years to come on board. It takes years for a decision to be made so that we can see some of these projects being realized and all that. And I'm also glad that really we have institutions that are coming on board, especially with regard to financial constraints that we are now facing in Africa. For as much as we have good plans, we have good initiatives, it always comes back to us because we do not have the financial means of taking them forward. And lately, I have seen a lot of contribution coming in, especially from the World Bank. We also have our German counterparts. We have GIZ, and they are so much into this initiative of climate change, global warming reduction, and really coming up with projects, even just of creating awareness among the population of what we are supposed to do and what we are not supposed to do, for us to see this. And now we are even faced with I don't know how much other countries are prepared or have already taken on. We are talking of fourth industrialization. Are we prepared? How fast are we towards that? Technology is evolving, technology is changing a lot, and coronavirus, this pandemic has opened our eyes. It has really brought us at that space where we could see that the way that we have been living, the way that we have been doing things, it's high time that all this has come to an end. We need a paradigm shift towards now. You know, we need to go virtual as we are doing it now. It's already one step ahead towards CO2 emission. You don't need to travel. You don't need to use transport and do all this. And it's possible, it's happening. Myself, I would not even want to go back to the era. So our president has actually established a steering committee to assess the country's preparedness towards adopting and embracing the fourth industrial revolution on all sectors, be it from agriculture, come to energy, be it on education that was the hard hit. Children are suffering. So all this is not only because of one country a decision or whatever, it's a collective throughout the whole continent. And I just need the leaders to engage themselves more proactively. We should look at how Zambia is doing it, how Nigeria has been doing it, how far did it go with them, where do we need to change so that we can see something different that any other countries could also adopt.
Thank you, Victoria. Let me jump in and ask David how Kenya is doing exactly what you've just been speaking to. So David, what's your view on collective action in this framework and what's Kenya doing to advance it?
Thank you. Let me mention something from the onset, that I feel Africa is currently the stabilizer of global warming currently, and I'll say why. Our global emission is around 2% of the total emissions, barely 2%. And Africa houses 18% of the global population, second largest continent. So when you look at that, we can say today Africa is actually more or less of a stabilizer. The good news is that Africa has the potential actually to be the savior for the future of climate challenge. And I'll say this in 2 points. One is the baseload potential for renewable energy, both hydro and geothermal. The geothermal capacity in the Eastern African region is enormous. And if we are collectively going to set ourselves as a global community to develop this geothermal resource, for instance, is one way to make sure we are actually cutting global emissions drastically. The second point I want to mention, and also from Kenyan point of view, where we are actually putting all the efforts on geothermal and also helping the region in terms of enabling the regional countries to tap geothermal, is the question of capacity building. And capacity building is actually the human resource training and development, right? And therefore, from where we sit, for instance, in Kenya here, we have actually extensive training programs on the geothermal sciences, both locally here and the partnership with international universities to make sure we are developing this capacity. And because of that, we are able to tap this baseload capacity in a way that we are able now to help other countries tap the same resource. On top of that, you also need to look at innovations, which are homegrown. For us to be able to do that, research institutions becomes very, very important. And this is where we have to work with the global community and other development partners, GIZ and others who are ready to offer grants for research to be able to come to Africa and even to come to Kenya and be able to participate with the local universities and promote this capability for innovation, research and development. Adding to that, there's a question of policy, as my colleague talked about the policy development. I have seen where we have school of regulators in other countries. It's the high time, even in South Africa, starting with Kenya, we have a school for regulations, so that we have constantly developing policies, testing them whether they are applicable in our own context. Maybe one of the reasons they are not working for us is maybe they are not within our context. And if that testing and adapting is what will actually make sure these policies and regulations are working for us to be able to move forward in terms of the baseload capacity I'm talking about. To add to that is the issue of technical colleges, which we call technical and vocational training. We need skills from the onset for people to be able to manage these power plants, these renewable power plants we are bringing on board, the wind, the solar, the geothermal. That technical capability is very, very important. And this can also can only happen if we are emulating SDG 17, partnership and collaborations. And if that happens, I am very optimistic that in very short time, we will start seeing effects of reducing carbon emissions going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Professor Sambo, I'm going to come back to you briefly because our time, as you'll appreciate, is short. But on the basis of what you've heard now from our colleagues in Namibia and Kenya, Dr. Elham had spoken just before you were able to join. But what you've heard from our colleagues in Namibia and Kenya, do you feel optimistic that collaborative action, sharing of information, insights, technological breakthroughs and the like would be something that might appeal to colleagues in Nigeria, enabling them to make a contribution to the rest of the continent as well?
Definitely. Nigeria is very much thinking in that direction. As a matter of fact, what we did recently was to take a look at the projection. What is the electricity going to be for our country in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, up to 2050. And we then worked out the skills requirement, and we got in touch with the National Universities Commission, as well as the National Board for Technical Education, so that the planning of the manpower needs to provide, to cater for the energy requirements of our country will be sorted out. And in doing that, we recognize that quite a number of African countries that are not as large as us may want to benefit from the manpower we are producing. In fact, as of now, in Nigerian universities and polytechnics, we have nationals from different African countries, not only West Africa, but as far as Southern Africa as well. And also in recognition of the recent decision of African countries, African continental agreement, whereby products will be produced in one part of Africa will be more easily accessed in other parts of Africa. And we're thinking in terms of industrial capacity, that one of the best ways to ensure movement towards zero emission, net zero 2050, is to ensure that as much of the power plant components of the renewable systems are produced within the African continents. And in view of the recent, like I've just mentioned, the continental agreement, it will more be in a cooperative manner, be available much easier, much cheaper in other African countries. And in this way, we are thinking that the overall continent's renewable energy portfolio will increase. Also, I'm sure you are all aware that it has been the policy of African Union to promote cooperation amongst countries. And that's why very often we hear about the power pools and the Great Inga. As a matter of fact, a meeting was held at the ECOWAS, that's West African Group, 2 months ago, to strengthen interconnections between West African countries, so that countries that have excess for whatever reason can let the electricity be made available. In fact, for countries that even don't have access, but for the purpose of getting other countries like water resources, we have this River Niger that traverses through 8 West African countries. So many West African countries were thinking of damming it, but with negotiation with them, they have not been damming it. So Nigeria, that has hydroelectricity from this river, almost getting to 2,000 megawatts, is sharing it with some of the countries. So yes, cooperation is the way to go, and we are in that direction.
Good. Thank you very much. Dr. Elham, I'm very mindful. I'm not going to be able to come back to you for a question now, but I want to pay acknowledgement and recognition to the extraordinary role that you've played in coordinating precisely the sort of things that we're talking about on a continental level, particularly during the years when you were the commissioner responsible for those activities. We have to close it out now, but let me try and summarize what I think the core of this discussion has been. Firstly, every country has to address its own nationally determined contribution, and it has to find means of effecting coordination within its own national boundaries to enable the most efficient transition possible in a manner consistent with its NDC as upgraded as a consequence, firstly, of technology transformation, which Victoria has already referred to twice, and in addition to that, to the fact that our reports that we're receiving from the IPCC since 2015 all indicate that climate change is likely to prove more disruptive than was even anticipated at that point. Secondly, we still have, I don't know what the real number is, I don't think anyone does, but something like 650 million Africans who do not have access to modern energy. And clearly that problem has to be addressed, and it has to remain front and center in our minds as we address these challenges. Thirdly, we need baseload, and we need to ensure that that baseload is as clean as it possibly can be. And that involves the application of technological solutions on an increasing scale. I thought what David was saying about geothermal is extremely interesting in that regard, particularly along the Rift Valley. We need, as we've said several times, better regional energy sharing. The old issue of continental interconnectors between the region power pools is as important as it's ever been. And we need large-scale expansion of renewables-based off-grid generation and distribution facilities to reduce energy poverty. The reality of Africa is it has the fastest growing and youngest population in the world, and that is likely to continue for the balance of the century. If we don't solve these problems now, the youth will have a much worse future than they deserve to have. Victoria is the only one who can plausibly claim to be representative of the youth here. People like Abubakar and I would never say it of Dr. Elham, but maybe even Dr. Elham, are not of a generation that is going to inherit the future. Victoria's generation and those behind her are those that are going to do that. And those of us who still have some influence in policy circles making these particular decisions have a compelling need to ensure that the right decisions are taken, the right plans are put in place, appropriate capacity is put in place, and execution occurs in order to protect the future for our children and grandchildren. Thank you very much to all of you. I think it's been a most interesting exchange. I frankly was impressed by what is underway in many countries. And I think the understanding that we are all in this together and we have to collaborate effectively in order to address the challenges has come out of each of your presentations. Thank you very much indeed. And I'll hand it back to the Master of Ceremonies.